Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. We met our guest today at the Compassionate Friends National Conference.
We did, yes, in St. Louis this summer, and his name is Sam Timbrook. And Sam has a lot of professional qualifications as well as personal experience with grief and loss mom. Sam has a master's in counseling. He has a PhD in Christian education. He is a certified grief coach. He is a pastor, and he has a 501c3 called The Connection. Sam's wife, Mary Helen, died 5 years ago, and his son Ryan just recently died 7 months ago. So he will tell us about how he has found hope after loss and how others can too. So welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you very much. It's my joy to be with you.
Well, Sam, I'll have to tell you, I was really saddened by the loss of your son and such a short time ago, and your wife 5 years ago. And you were telling us before the show started that they both had, was it muscular dystrophy?
Yes, muscular dystrophy. It was interesting. We knew there was something major with our son when he was born. And because of that, his needs, he lived with us all of his years. He passed away at age 40. My wife, who also had muscular dystrophy, was not diagnosed until she turned 60. And that certainly is not typical, but it took both of their lives.
Wow.
I want to ask you, I mean, you're a remarkable person. You've done a lot of caretaking and caregiving, and wow,
Yes. Yes.
in your life. How have you done that?
Well, I've just kept on keeping on, so to speak. People have asked me, how did I do it? I just didn't have a choice. You know, I had to do it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I'll just be honest with you. I've been in the ER at least 2 times with what I thought was a heart attack, but it was anxiety from my caretaking years.
Wow.
Well,
And also, I'd say I have an older son. He and his wife have just been wonderful, wonderful in helping and allowing his mother, their mother and me to get away on respite sometimes. We've had some other people who have offered to help, but you know, they're limited in what they can provide. But we've had some very gracious people. But it's I'm not gonna lie, it's been tough.
Yeah.
Well,
But
what I was also wondering, Mom, you know, we interview people that have had people die after illness like you have, Sam, and the one thing they say to us is that it's an odd thing because so much of your time and identity is wrapped up in caretaking.
yes,
And when people die, all of a sudden that role is not only is that person gone, but that entire role is gone. Your whole life is really
Yes.
changed profoundly.
Yeah.
I bet.
yes. When my wife died, first of all, I tell people my wife died 2 times.
Mm.
And I say that because when she was diagnosed, she, within a few months, got to the point where she couldn't swallow.
Wow.
She couldn't turn over in bed. We couldn't relate. We couldn't talk. I mean, you know, and I often tell people I grieved the living. Her body was still alive. Her body still functioned, but she was tube fed. She had to have everything taken care of her. And so I call that grieving the living because the person I knew had gone.
Right.
And then 2 years later, she literally physically died. But after she passed away, I knew I had no choice. With the help of my son and his wife, who've been so great, I had no choice but to focus on my son.
Right.
And then when he died, and we just had a few days warning,
Wow.
when he died, then I became so lonely. And I still am. I hate the sun to go down. I have faith. It's not a faith issue. And I want to emphasize that it is not a faith issue. It's a human issue.
You know, I love that you're saying this.
Yeah, me too.
It's not a faith issue because
It's
some
not.
people are saying, "Where's God?" But you're not feeling where's
No.
God. You are a pastor. Talk
My faith is stronger than ever before, but I'm still human. And whether you're a spiritual person or not, whether you're a faith person or not, I tell people, you know, the Bible says, even though I walk through the valley and go around it, can't avoid it. You know, that's one thing I've found in some books I've read. They act like you can avoid the pain, but you can't. You have to go through it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And what a journey you have been on. I know you were counseling before your son died, right? In between, and
Yes,
you were a counselor when your wife was diagnosed.
yes, yes.
So you've
Most of
counseled
them,
in the grief and loss world for many years, or just
yes.
in general.
Yeah. But do you know some of the people that I counseled in the on the topic of grief and loss before my wife was diagnosed and before I realized with my son that I was in grief? You know, with my son, every time he should have been doing something because of his chronological age, but he couldn't because of his disability. I went through grief, grief, grief. I didn't know to call it that. But anyway, but I almost, before my wife's death and my son's death, when I used to counsel people about grief, I almost want to go back and apologize to them
Mm.
because I thought I knew what they were going through, but I didn't.
Yeah, I know the feeling because I know when my son was killed, I actually was worked at a hospital counseling people
Yeah,
who had had loss, and I saw a family and said, I don't know what you're going through, but I think I have some things that can help you. But then I had to take the trip,
yeah, yeah,
and even if you've got a map, you still got
right,
to take the trip.
yeah. That's one of the things I always look for when I see a new book at the bookstore about grief and loss. Oh, by the way, I prefer not to call it grief and loss. I prefer to call it grief because of loss.
I like
But I look at a book, one of the first things I want to know is, have they personally experienced loss? And if they've not, I don't even consider buying the book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's quite a trip. So I'm your resilience is amazing. You were talking about the compassionate friends. You're
Yes,
going there now. You're going to do the newsletter. Talk
yes.
about how you have found hope.
Certainly getting to know people from all walks of life who have experienced something like this. And I've learned that they have hope. They may not, it may not be packaged for them the way it is for me. Uh, I think, and I'm not trying to send a religious trip on anyone, I think God has been preparing me for years
Mm.
for these losses. People I've come in contact with, things that I have read, things that I've experienced. And at the time, I thought, why is this happening? Now I know, and the puzzle pieces are coming together. But I think one of the greatest things is that I have finally admitted my need. And that is so hard for a man.
Mhm.
And that I've learned too about um, how men and women express grief differently, and how I have to be vulnerable, even in front of women,
Uh-huh.
to to cry.
Mhm.
And I've also learned I just have to take time off. Um, but being a pastor, I'm supposed to carry everyone else's burdens.
Right.
And I have been very, very fortunate, though. The church I pastor, I've been what we call bivocational. I've done like school psychology or counseling or whatever, and pastoring of a smaller church. I don't say small, it's smaller. But I have, uh, I believe, the greatest church in the world
Wow.
as far as their support of me and people who are hurting and people who have lost and people who are in pain.
Wow.
That's amazing. And and we know how important it is to have support around you when you're grieving.
Yes,
So
yes,
I one of the things I think is when people hear you, some people have had a faith in a church when they were children, but they haven't been back.
right.
And if they do have a faith, I would encourage them to get involved, get re-involved.
Yes. There there is a church somewhere for everyone who's hurting. It may not be um, like you have alluded to, it may not be the childhood faith. It may not be the church of our childhood, but there's a church somewhere for people who are hurting. And I have discovered that there's a lot of hurting people, but they're not necessarily whiners. You know, there are some people who have learned all the attention they get because they're grieving, and they like that attention. You know, it meets an emotional need. But I'm not talking about finding a place where you can whine. It's to be honest. It's to ask for help, and you know, just to grow together in our grief. Because I think we're all grieving about something. Because, like I said, it's grief because of loss. And the loss could be anything from losing a job to losing your health to a miscarriage to a divorce to, you know, actually losing a loved one.
Hmm. And unless you've had it happen, you really can't know that loss. But your
Right.
loss can be big, you know, if you've had a divorce or, you
Yeah.
know, whatever, a loss of
Yeah.
a job. If that's the loss you know, you can only know the loss you know. Isn't
Yeah.
that your thought on that, Hi?
Yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing that I agree with what Sam said is that, you know, as we're grieving a community, not only are we accepting grief support, but we're giving grief support. And I
Right.
think in that dance and in doing that, that really heals us in both places.
Yeah.
Very healing.
Yeah. I think you go through a time after your loss. You know, sure, there's the denial part, and I think that's needed. I really do. I think if we had all of the emotion thrown at us at once, we couldn't survive.
I agree.
But there comes a point where you realize that one of the things you need to do to actually help yourself is to help others
Hmm.
and to grieve with them in their situation, and to realize there's some who are suffering probably a lot more than you are. And they may say the same thing about me. I don't know, but a lot of these uh, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I've read or seen or talked about with others, some of them forget about the numb stage first. I think you can go through those too soon, but there does come that time where you start looking at others as well as yourself, and you help them, and you know, in this path that they're going on.
Hmm. And also, I think you alluded a little earlier to something that give people the opportunity to be of service to you. That's a gift.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
hard sometimes to give people that gift.
yeah. It is.
So,
Pride doesn't want to do that.
so Sam, before we started the show, you talked about the three N's. That you
Yes.
want to tell people. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I always tell people, whether I'm talking with them like on a internet like we are, or whether it's a conference that I lead, that grief because of loss, that there's the three N's. One is your feelings and emotions. It's natural, it's normal, but it's also necessary. Because if we don't allow ourselves to grieve, uh, eventually it's gonna eat itself out.
Hmm.
And um, in our culture, we want people to get back to their normal routine. We want them to get back to work. We want them to get back to doing whatever it is they do in their normal day so quickly. We don't allow people the time to grieve in many places. But boy, it's the feelings are natural and normal, and that's one thing that I've had the privilege of helping people understand, that what they're thinking and feeling really is natural and normal. And then that third N, it's necessary. We've just got to go through it.
And what happens if we don't?
I think it shows up in what some people have called toxic grief, and it can ruin our health, it can ruin our relationship, it can cause us to live a bitter life. Uh, it can cause us not only to make some poor choices physically or emotionally or spiritually, but we just I think it can shorten our life. I really do. Plus, I think it it cuts off any help that others are trying to give us, including God.
So, so Sam, I had another question for you. After did you learn anything after your wife died about yourself that helped you, that has helped you with the death of your son?
Yes, that after my wife died, I went through a time of feeling very relieved because I no longer had to take care of her. She had so many needs. Then I went through a time of feeling guilty because I felt relieved. When my son passed away, and it's only been 7, 8 months, I've not gone through that guilt. I'm relieved that I don't have that responsibility. I'm relieved that I don't have the fear of what's going to happen to him after I can't take care of him. But I've not gone through the guilt. I've rather, even though I tear up, I'm so grateful that even though he had a lot of problems and a lot of surgeries and the list goes on, he didn't have to go through what his mother did.
That guilt and shame. We should be
Oh,
taking care of it. We should be this. We should be that.
yeah,
All this shoulding. Well,
yeah.
we've got one last piece of advice for people before we get to your websites. What would it be to find hope?
Listen to people and what they say, but filter what they say. Being a pastor, I've had some people suggest to me about, well, in the Bible, King David, when his son died, he just got up and went on with life. Well, what they don't know is that later when he wrote some of the Psalms, he was depressed. Now, he had a lot of other issues too, you know. Learn some things about the different way people grieve, especially the way men grieve and women grieve. I also think I would say to people, I don't think you'll ever get over it, but you can get through it.
Mm-hmm.
There is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I live in central Missouri, halfway between Kansas City and St. Louis in Columbia, Missouri. But my website is simply www.samtimbrook.com.
Sam, thank you. You're a wonderful person. And
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
privileged to be able to talk to you today.
Well, I tell you, I'm thrilled for this opportunity, and I just can't express my appreciation for this chance to talk.
Sam, thank you for being so candid and honest today.
You're welcome.
And for everybody that's watching this, I want you to remember something Sam said, because I think it's profound that we can grow together in our grief.
Yes.
And as Heidi and I always want to remind everybody that watches this show, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.
Yes.